So in this video, I'm going to connect more pagan myths to the greater myths of the ancient world, certainly mostly coming from Africa, and mostly as a reaction. You must always ask yourself, who made these myths, for what purpose and why? Why do these variations exist? And certainly they fit the needs of the people, the different terrain, the different body types of the people, the different inclinations of the people, and the varying moral codes. You are going to come to the conclusion, inevitably, that the African martial arts Light Temple moral code is the highest standard that is elaborated on, that is known, and certainly it is the beginning of morality. Martial artists who use righteous indignation to marshal society together in the spirit of the Light Temple, truth and God. You have different forms of discipline. You have a military discipline, which is more dynamic, and it depends on the state of the union, the politics of the state. You have discipline as a field of study, the scientist's discipline. And then you have a true Light Temple discipline derived from a higher moral code from God himself in the spirit of righteous indignation, which is a light temple, all white, no yin-yang, no lukewarm, no halfway, truth. So let's talk about the rape of the Sabines and the Capitoline Triad. March is an interesting month. It's March right now. The first is a festival to Juno, also the New Year. The 14th is the horse race of Mars. The 19th is a festival for Minerva. And the 23rd is the purification of sacred trumpets, a festival for Mars. Okay, so Jupiter is the main god of Rome. He helped Romulus push back the Sabines when they were angry at the rape of the Sabines. Was basically they invited a bunch of Sabine women, because they were short on women, to a sort of sports contest. And they basically tricked them and started raping them, and it's depicted in very disturbing ways in various depictions. Okay, so his wife is Juno. Juno had Mars by a flower, who Mars then raped Rhea. And it was reading this story around the time I was watching a documentary about the Irish Civil War that my sight began to fail, and I was fumed, heavily suffering from extreme photophobia. This is why I wear these glasses nowadays. And my phone is dimmed, blue light off. Minerva is the third deity in the Capitoline Triad that was brought to Rome in myth when an Etruscan contingent came to Romulus's aid against the Sabines. So I'm going to show you these things. It's key, right? Juno is depicted as an Asiatic and hungry. And certainly you can draw parallels to the connection of Eurasian martial arts, Mars, martial arts. And also the martial term is used with Athena as well as Minerva. So you have Mars, Hermes, really, and you have Minerva and Athena, all related to martial arts. We'll get to that shortly. And Hermes is more of like a scientific, techie guy, and a smith, the lord of pickpockets and so on. Anyway, Minerva is the third deity in the Capitoline Triad that was brought to Rome in myth. The Romans are said to have raped their women during sports games they invited them to. Okay, in San Francisco, the Sons of Italy Lodge is by the Grand Lodge of Masonry. They are the only two in San Francisco that popped up when I did the Google search. So now let's go through this. Juno, a Roman goddess of marriage and the long-suffering wife of Jupiter. Like her Greek equivalent Hera, she was the protector of women, in particular married women. So if you marry, which implies a certain social complicity, if you will, a certain social acceptance, then you're protected by this Roman goddess. Okay. A festival took place in her honor on the calends 1st of March. When referred to as Juno Lucina, she was the goddess of childbirth. Those making offerings to her had to untie any knots about their person, since these could hinder a safe delivery. As Juno Moneta, she governed finance in the Roman mint, was located in her temple on the Capitoline Hill. Juno's name is the feminine counterpart of Jupiter, Heavenly Father, and whereas all men had their genius, all women had their Juno. Remember, she's basically a deity of gold digging and turning a blind eye to the raping of men, and she actually helped the Romans, in in their myths, kick back, to push back the Sabaeans who were angry about rape. So she's countering the righteous indignation of warriors who are trying to rescue their women and take back their women and take vengeance upon their enemies who had raped their women. So these are very demonic deities. And Jupiter looks like Pan. In one of my other videos before this, I go over how Pan is the god of sexual immorality, really raping, basically it's subtly implied rape, coercion, using drugs and alcohol, little kids, pedophilia, homosexuality, and so on. Okay, so here's Jupiter. Jupiter, the Roman equivalent of Zeus, he came to hold the predominant position in the Roman pantheon, appearing as the god of the sky, of daylight, of the weather, and particularly of thunder and lightning. He came to hold this position partly through the identification with Zeus and partly through the assistance he offered Romulus in driving back the Sabaeans. Romulus established a temple to Jupiter at the spot where he had first implored his assistance. With his temple on the Capitol, Jupiter was seen as the supreme power, whose priest, Flaminindialus, was married to the priestess of Juno, Flaminica. It was to Jupiter that newly elected councils offered their first prayers, and it was he who oversaw international relations through the mediation of the College of Priests. The establishment of a capital similar to that at Rome in every provincial city affirmed the political bond between Rome as mother city and the daughters, which were all a copy of her. So basically it goes, Juno is impregnated, by a flower, and she has Mars, who then rapes Rhea, I believe, who is and becomes the progenitor of the Roman race in mythology. So we have this rape, and then the Romans are produced. So their culture is rape and pillage. Juno, finance, turning a blind eye to rape. Give me the money. I don't care what you guys do. Just buy me nice things type of dumb bitch, right? Women have their Juno, their gold-digging whores in the foundation of Western culture, which is Greco-Roman culture. That's why Jupiter is compared to Zeus. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I suggest you go back, watch the first 7 minutes again. It's pretty straightforward if you ask me. Okay, Marduk, referred to Baal as Lord. Let's just go over this briefly. Babylonian proof around here that basically the different Babylonian gods, Mesopotamian gods, are aspects of Marduk, who has a kind of, Chinese New Year look to him, if you know what I mean. All right, so we've connected the war arts. Of course, Mars, you see the armor. This is a later depiction, okay? You can tell by the way that Mars is depicted that, it is the arts of war as it pertains to science, mostly, and kind of primitive warfare, and is refined over time with the Eurasian alliance, who basically gets their martial arts from Africa through India. Africa, India, Buddhism, Shaolin Temple, the refinement of the martial arts through the different pagan perspectives. And yes, everything I read proves more and more that these different religions, all mainstream religions, pagan religions, are reactions to the natural light temple order. So here's Minerva, the Roman goddess of crafts and trade, right? You talk about, masonry, okay? The craft, the trade, the tricks of the trade, and of the intellectual activity necessary to their successful practice. Culture, a sapiosexual culture that values intellect over superstition. Minerva was identified with the Greek goddess Pallas Athena and took over her martial characteristics. Martial, not marital. Read it carefully when I show you. Together with Jupiter and Juno, she was one of the great Capitoline triad and was introduced to Rome by an Etruscan contingent which came to the aid of Romulus. Minerva's festival was the Quinquaterus, 19th March. She plays no part in any specific Roman legend. So you'll see her with her Roman-styled sphinx, which is a woman's face. Okay, read this real quickly. The description of the picture. Now, notice she's dressed as a warrior, her martial characteristics. So she's marshaling kind of Satan's order, or Lucifer's order, if you see it as part good, part evil. I see this thing as extremely evil. They're going in the direction of science and not nature, and they dare speak about religion. One could argue that this is not a spiritual religion. This is a myth-based religion for the purpose of affecting culture and impressing upon them certain principles, which are basically the principles of evil. These are the people, these are the cults, rather, that were pushed back into Southern Europe who then emerged as the governing class of the Europeans. It doesn't necessarily mean the average European is evil, no more than a corrupt government means that the average citizens are evil. But certainly these cult philosophies are evil, and innocent people have been suffering because of them for a long time. Is it racial pride to then back them up because they're more associated with your race? Is it white power? Or is it satanic red power, red being the color of evil and not of a race, which is really what is going on here? Okay, think of gene expression. These are the people who chose to go with their, evil inclinations and to do things in a horrible way. So also I want you to note that Dionysus is depicted with dolphins and riding a dolphin. And Odin here is depicted as some kind of an ape with his raven and his spear, I believe. The description's right here. I got to go through this quickly. If I make a mistake, I apologize. I don't want to hear anybody crying about facts being twisted, as I have to cram these things into 15-minute videos. And I upload videos at a certain rate already. It takes up a certain amount of time, and I don't want to lose my viewers. So when you consider everything, and I'm being drugged and harassed and everything put together, and the anger of being sabotaged, my love life and everything put together, while reading about sex cults, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that I'm doing a pretty damn good job. All right, moving on. So the ape and the dolphin as the symbols of intellect and articulation and communication, right? These aren't the animals that are necessarily the smartest, but when it comes to communicating with humans, they are considered the smartest because of their ability to communicate to humans. So now, where does the idea of the Logos come from itself? It comes from Egypt. So you have the first depictions of martial arts in Egypt at Beni Hassan. I've gone over that in my other videos. The first reference to a Logos doctrine comes from Ptah, who visualized and created the universe from his heart. The heart as the seat of intelligence is a kind of pervasive idea in Egyptian mythology that is perhaps the most dramatically, the most expressed and manifested, the most intense manifestation being in the Temple of Haru, who were actually, from history's understanding at least, the greatest warriors from a martial arts perspective in the ancient world and in Egypt, certainly. So here you have Ptah, a creator deity, I believe, from the Memphis triad, I believe it's called. The Memphis kind of Trinity triad. And, all right. Bear with me, I'm shook up. Yeah, keep moving on. So Remus, let's go to Renunet. Okay, you get the idea of the magical power in the linen garments worn by Pharaoh. So the idea that, the mummy is more than just to preserve the body. There are magical powers, and this goes back to the martial arts kind of clothing, the kilt that was worn by the followers of Haru, etc., where these things have magical power, because when you're working out and you feel the energy, the creative energy and the warrior energy flowing through you, okay, it is said to be kept in the garments that you're wearing, which passed on to the idea of the linen garments, which ended up being to protect the mummified corpse in the afterlife. So my warrior energy is expressed through my garments, and therefore the Pharaoh is mummified. And this used to be restricted to the Pharaoh before the democratization of the Pharaoh's power. So he's the top martial artist with this divine warrior energy flowing through his garments. And that passes on to the Asian Kung Fu Gi. And I'm not racist. I wear this because I did Kung Fu it for a time. I moved on in my own direction, which is not unheard of in martial arts. I learned from their principles. I found myself, and so on. Also, oh yeah, I forgot. Before I forget, Jupiter is referred to as Jupiter Amun. Remember, Amun is the guy who went around usurping, just like Marduk. The different gods are said to be, different deities are said to be different aspects of Marduk. So Jupiter is referred to as Jupiter Amun. So Jupiter Amun, Amun Ra. You see how it goes, the white god Jupiter, the white cult kind of thing, Jupiter, these evil guys. The Amun cult, kind of Asiatic, kind of usurper cult, kind of lukewarm, Luciferian idea in a way. And then Ra, which is the main god of Egypt. Okay, you see how that works. So here, right here, we'll end with this. Jupiter Amun. Okay, and of course he looks like Pan. So you see how when all this connects, you're forced to the conclusion that yes, this is happening because of insecurities and where martial arts starts in Africa with the black Africans.